I was holding a warm dinner plate when my aunt pointed at the garage like I didn't belong in the house. No raised voice, no shouting. Just a calm gesture, polished nails flicking toward the hallway as if she were directing a delivery instead of dismissing a person. The room went quiet in that very specific way families get quiet when they're pretending nothing wrong is happening. Chairs stopped scraping. Glasses froze midair. Someone laughed too late. I didn't argue. That's the part that still haunts me. I nodded once, felt the heat crawl up my neck, and stepped backward out of the dining room while no one stopped me. Not my cousins, not my parents, not a single person who shared my blood. The garage door creaked open, and the smell of oil and cold concrete wrapped around me. There was a space heater buzzing in the corner, a chair already pulled up to the workbench. They had planned for this. Only after I sat down, hands trembling over my untouched plate, did I finally understand something I had been refusing to name my entire life. My name is Amy Castaneda, and I was 24 years old. When it finally became clear that I wasn't part of my family, I was just tolerated. That realization didn't arrive all at once. It had been dripping into me for years. Forgotten invitations, conversations that stopped when I walked in, praise reserved for everyone else. I grew up thinking that if I stayed quiet enough, useful enough, grateful enough, eventually I'd earn my place. But families like mine don't work that way. They decide who matters early, and everyone else spends their life orbiting that decision. Growing up, I was the quiet one in a loud family. My cousins were celebrated constantly. Athletes, honor students, social butterflies. Their achievements were framed and mounted like trophies. Mine were acknowledged with nods, if at all. I learned early that the safest way to exist was to be helpful and invisible at the same time. I liked fixing things. Broken laptops, old electronics, anything people had written off as useless. There was comfort in repair proof that damaged didn't mean worthless. I spent hours in garages and back rooms learning patience because machines demanded it. People rarely did. My parents weren't cruel. That almost made it worse. My mother was the youngest of 5, conditioned to keep peace at any cost. My father worked long hours, came home exhausted, and avoided conflict like it was a contagious disease. They loved me, I think. But love without protection leaves bruises you're expected to hide. Every Christmas, we drove upstate to my aunt's house. Massive ceilings, designer decorations, everything staged to look perfect. Tradition mattered more than comfort. Appearances mattered more than people. I learned where I ranked by where I was seated, how I was greeted, what was remembered about me. That night, I had brought gifts, real ones, thoughtful ones. I had just landed my first full-time job at a tech repair company, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was scraping by. I wanted them to see me, to recognize I wasn't a child anymore. Under the tree, I saw piles of boxes with everyone else's names on them. For me, there was an envelope. I told myself not to read into it. Dinner was elaborate. Gold runners, crystal glasses, a signed hierarchy disguised as tradition. I hesitated when I realized there were enough seats at the main table this year. I reached for a chair anyway. That's when my aunt stopped me. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "The garage is heated," she said sweetly. "You can eat in there." And no one objected. So there I sat now, alone on a folding chair, my food cooling beside me, staring at a workbench I had repaired for free years earlier. My hands were shaking not from cold, but from the slow collapse of something I'd been protecting since childhood. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. There was one name I hadn't contacted in over a year. My thumb hovered. Then I pressed send. "If you meant what you said before, I'm ready." I didn't know what would happen next. I only knew I wasn't going to swallow this one, too. 10 minutes later, I heard chairs scrape inside the house. Voices shifted. Footsteps approached the door, then stopped. Whoever it was changed their mind. The garage door closed again softly. I laughed once under my breath. Figures. I stared at the wall, letting old moments surface the power outage I fixed, while everyone drank wine inside the jokes, whispered, when they thought I couldn't hear the way silence always won when it came to me. I hadn't eaten since morning. No one checked. No one brought food. I sat there in the garage they thought was good enough for me and waited. And that was the moment everything began to change. The garage door opened again about 15 minutes later. This time the footsteps didn't retreat. I didn't turn around right away. I didn't trust myself to look up and see pity, or worse, awkward obligation. I kept my eyes on the workbench, tracing a scratch in the wood with my fingertip like it mattered. "Hey, Ev." It was my father's voice, low, careful. the same tone he used when he didn't want to start anything. I nodded once. You okay? Another nod. That was all he was getting from me. He shifted his weight hands shoved deep into his pockets. Your mom wanted to come out, but your aunt started opening another bottle and, well, you know how it goes. I did. That was the problem. They're about to do presents, he added. Like that was a peace offering. I finally looked at him then. Presents. He winced just slightly. Your envelope's still under the tree. Of course it was. He waited, maybe hoping I'd say something that would let him feel useful. I didn't. After a moment, he cleared his throat and backed out of the garage like he was afraid of waking something dangerous. The door shut. I stood up slowly, joints stiff, pride bruised, but not broken. I wasn't going back to that table. I wasn't going to sit in exile like I'd done my whole life. I needed air, space, distance from walls that had heard too much silence already. Outside, snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked down the driveway. The night was sharp and clean, the kind of cold that burns your lungs just enough to remind you you're alive. I took a deep breath and held it until my chest ached. That's when my phone buzzed. A new message lit up the screen. Glad you reached out. Where are you? My throat tightened. I hadn't texted Nathan Castaneda, my mother's younger brother, in over a year. Not since I'd convinced myself staying loyal to people who dismissed me was somehow noble. He was the one the family didn't talk about. The problem. The mistake they edited out of stories. But when I was a kid, he was the only adult who saw me. He used to send me handmade wooden puzzles, show up to school events no one else bothered attending. When I won second place at a science fair, he clapped like I'd cured cancer. That kind of attention sticks. That kind of love rewires you. Then one day he was gone. No explanation. Just silence dressed up as necessity. Still at Denise's, I typed. Just stepped outside. The reply came almost instantly. Stay there, I'm on my way. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to laugh or cry. I didn't even know where he was coming from. I didn't ask. For once, I didn't overthink it. I slipped the phone back into my coat and stood there watching the warm, yellow glow of the house through the trees. Laughter drifted out, faintly muffled and careless, like I'd already been erased from the evening script. 10 minutes later, headlights cut through the snow. A dark sedan pulled into the driveway, sleek, unfamiliar, deliberate. The engine purred before shutting off. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out, shoulders broader than I remembered, hair threaded with gray. But his eyes were the same. Hey, kid, Nathan said, like we'd spoken yesterday instead of years ago. I swallowed hard. Hey. He didn't ask questions, didn't look toward the house, just clapped a hand on my shoulder and squeezed once grounding and solid. Let's go. Where I asked, though, part of me already knew. Somewhere you're wanted? I looked back at the house one last time. The windows glowed. Inside, they were probably laughing, opening gifts, congratulating themselves on another perfect holiday. They had no idea I was leaving. And this time I wasn't coming back smaller. The drive was quiet at first, not awkward, just calm. The kind of silence that settles after something heavy finally lifts. Nathan turned the heat up, old rock playing softly through the speakers. I didn't realize how tense my body had been until it started to relax. Thanks for coming, I said eventually. You shouldn't have had to ask, he replied without looking over. That did something to me. We stopped at a roadside diner off the highway, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and a bell that rang when the door opened. He ordered pancakes and bacon. I ordered a cheeseburger and a milkshake like I was 16 again. When the food arrived, I took one bite and started crying. I hadn't planned to. I wasn't sobbing, just quiet tears dropping onto my plate like my body had finally found permission. Nathan didn't react. He slid a napkin across the table and kept eating. You know, he said casually, your mom used to stand up to them before she got tired. I wiped my face. What changed? Fear, he said. It spreads faster than courage. I nodded slowly. That tracked. He studied me for a moment. You ever think about starting over somewhere else? I hesitated. I don't have much saved. Just started a new job. I rent a room. It's nothing impressive. He smirked. Neither is freedom. At first. Something loosened in my chest. When he dropped me off later, he didn't give me a lecture. Just looked at me seriously and said, they shrink you because they're afraid of what you'll become if you don't stay small. I watched his taillights disappear into the night, and for the first time, I believed him. The house was dark when I got home. My roommates were away for the holidays, which meant there was no noise to distract me from my own thoughts. I dropped my coat onto the back of a chair, kicked off my boots, and sat on the edge of my bed without turning on the light. The silence felt heavier here than it had in the garage, but it was different. This wasn't imposed. This was mine. My phone buzzed on the mattress beside me. A message from my mother. Where did you go? Your aunt is really upset. I stared at it, waiting for the apology that didn't come. Another message followed. We didn't mean to hurt your feelings, Amy. You took it the wrong way. Please don't turn this into a thing. There it was, the familiar script. Minimize, deflect, preserve peace at all costs, even if the cost was me. I didn't respond. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, noticing things I'd never really looked at before. No family photos, no framed childhood moments, no proof that I'd ever belonged anywhere except the present. Just a bed, a desk, a few tools in the corner, and a calendar pinned crookedly to the wall. One date was circled in red. That night. I'd circled it weeks ago, convincing myself that this Christmas would be different. I tore the page down and dropped it into the trash. The next few weeks passed in a fog. I went to work, fixed broken laptops, soldered loose connections, replaced fried motherboards. Machines made sense. They broke for reasons. People broke because they were allowed to. I muted the family group chat. Didn't announce it. Didn't make a dramatic exit. I just disappeared. No one noticed. Except Nathan. Every few days, he'd text something small. A link to an article. A dumb meme. A picture of a half-built shelf in his garage. Sometimes just you good or proud of you. Those messages mattered more than I wanted to admit. Then, one afternoon in mid-January, my phone buzzed while I was elbow deep in a repair. Got something you might want to see, Nathan wrote. Friend of mine is retiring. Ran a tech repair shop for 30 years. No kids. Wants to sell. Cheap. I wiped my hands on a rag and reread the message, where I typed back. About an hour south of you. Small town. Growing fast. I didn't reply right away. I sat on the stool behind the counter, heart thudding, as a dozen thoughts crashed into each other. I had barely started my job. I didn't have much saved. I'd never owned anything bigger than a used car. But the idea lodged itself in my chest and refused to move. That night I didn't sleep. 2 days later, Nathan picked me up before sunrise. We drove through fog and farmland until the town appeared quiet, modest, unassuming. The shop sat on a corner near a river bend. Big front window. Hand-painted sign that read, Tech Haven, repairs, restorations, resurrections. Inside it smelled like dust and solder and old stories. The owner, a man named Jim, walked with a limp and smiled like he'd been waiting for us. He showed me everything, the books, the quirks, the machines that needed replacing the regular customers who came more for conversation than service. It wasn't glamorous. It was perfect. I don't want to sell to a chain, Jim said at one point, scratching his chin. I want it in good hands. Nathan glanced at me. Told you she was the real deal. My throat tightened. We worked out a deal that scared me. A small loan. Most of my savings. A leap that didn't come with a safety net. By March, I was holding the keys. I renamed the shop Circuit and Soul. The first month was brutal. I barely broke even. Some days I questioned everything. But I showed up. I fixed what people thought was beyond repair. Word spread slowly then, all at once. A teenager brought in a busted gaming console. I fixed it overnight. He brought 3 friends. A retired teacher asked if I could recover old videotapes. When I handed her the digitized files, she cried and hugged me like family. I started putting photos on the wall, not of relatives, but of customers smiling beside repaired machines. Proof that I mattered somewhere. Spring turned into summer. I laughed more, slept better, started believing cautiously that I was building something real. Then one day in July, an email landed in my inbox. From my cousin. Hey, heard you opened a shop. Denise was wondering if you could take a look at her laptop. Let me know your rates. No apology, no acknowledgement, just entitlement. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the calm before the part where the truth finally showed up uninvited. By the end of summer, Circuit and Soul didn't just feel like a business anymore. It felt like proof. Proof that I wasn't difficult, or forgettable, or a burden people tolerated out of obligation. Proof that when I showed up somewhere without shrinking myself first, I was welcomed. I learned the rhythm of the town quickly. Mornings were slow retirees dropping off old radios, parents bringing in laptops, sticky with fingerprints and juice spills. Afternoons belonged to students and small business owners who couldn't afford replacements and needed someone honest. Evenings were quiet, the kind that let you breathe while solder cooled and the sun slid down behind the river. I hired a part-time assistant from the local community college, sponsored a little league team because one kid asked if I would, said yes to a neighborhood cookout instead of inventing an excuse. Little decisions, but each one felt like I was choosing a different version of myself. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for permission. Still, the past didn't disappear just because I stopped feeding it. It lingered in small ways, my instinct to apologize before speaking, the way my shoulders tightened when someone praised me, the reflex to step back and let others take credit. Healing isn't linear. It's more like rewiring muscle memory. Nathan checked in often. Sometimes he'd stop by the shop unannounced with coffee and sit in the corner like he was guarding something precious. Other times we talked late on the phone about nothing and everything. He never rushed me, never tried to replace what I'd lost. He just stayed. In July, another message came from my family, this time not meant for me. It was a group email accidentally forwarded. Subject: holiday planning. Big idea. I almost deleted it. Curiosity stopped me. The message went on for paragraphs. A private lodge upstate, catered meals, matching sweaters, a professional videographer, a 3-day weekend dedicated to celebration, reflection, and legacy. Then I saw it. This year we're creating a family time capsule video. Everyone will share memories and gratitude. Interview slots were listed beneath. Ryan, 1 hour. Jared, 1 hour. Others, scheduled. My name wasn't there. Not even as an oversight. It was deliberate. Something settled in me then. Not anger, not even hurt, just clarity. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to embarrass anyone. I didn't want apologies they'd only offer to soothe themselves. I wanted truth in the room. I called Nathan. Thought you might, he said before I finished explaining. I'm not trying to blow things up, I told him. I don't want to be erased again. They've been erasing you for years, he replied. You're just done helping them. That night I started gathering things. Messages I'd minimized. Comments I'd ignored. Photos I'd laughed off. The gas card still sat untouched in my desk drawer. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt focused. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for a seat. I was deciding whether I even wanted to be in the room. And once that question was answered, everything else became very simple. I didn't respond to the email right away. I let it sit in my inbox for 2 full days, unread, but not forgotten, like a letter you already know the contents of. Every time I thought about it, my chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. This wasn't about being left out again. This was about how easily they erased me when it suited their narrative. A family legacy video. I almost laughed. Legacy, in my experience, was just a prettier word for selective memory. On the 3rd day, my phone rang. Haley's name lit up the screen. One of my cousins, the kind who followed the current rather than set it. She'd never been cruel outright, just conveniently silent. Amy, she said brightly. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I caught you. Hey, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. So listen, she continued, rushing slightly. There was a little mix-up with the email list about the holiday weekend. I said nothing. We'd love for you to come, she added quickly. Aunt Denise is really excited this year. She wants it to be special. Of course she does. And we're doing this video thing, Haley went on. You'll have an hour slot like everyone else to share your story, your gratitude, family stuff. Family stuff. Sounds nice, I said. There was a pause, like she was surprised I hadn't hesitated. So, you're in? Yes, I replied. I'll be there. She exhaled audibly. That's great. I'll send the updated schedule. When the call ended, I sat back in my chair and stared at the wall of Circuit and Soul, at the photos of customers smiling beside repaired machines, people who didn't need me to shrink before they accepted me. I wasn't going back to beg. I was going back to tell the truth. The next call I made was to Jim, the man who had sold me the shop. You ever done videography? I asked casually. He chuckled. Weddings, anniversaries, parades? Why? How do you feel about being a backup cameraman for a very fake family documentary? There was a pause. Then I'm intrigued. We met after closing hours and laid everything out. Jim would pose as technical support for the hired videographer, extra hands, extra equipment insurance. His cameras would run continuously. No editing tricks, no manipulation, just reality captured when people thought they were safe. I don't want to twist anything I said. I just want what they already say to be seen. Jim nodded slowly. Sometimes that's enough. Then I started digging. Old texts, screenshots, social media clips I'd ignored because confronting them felt exhausting. Ryan had a private account where he documented everything: snide jokes, eye rolls, moments of casual cruelty. He'd forgotten I was still following. I downloaded it all. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I felt oddly calm, like someone assembling puzzle pieces they didn't realize had been scattered for years. Late nights I edited quietly in the back room of my shop. No dramatic music, no manipulation, just juxtaposition. Their words, their actions, my silence filling the gaps between. I recorded a voiceover once steady and clear. This is what family looks like when they think no one is watching. 2 nights before Thanksgiving, my mother called. "I heard you're coming," she said carefully. "I am. You don't have to prove anything, Amy." "I know," I replied. "I'm just showing up." She hesitated. "Your aunt is trying very hard to make this perfect." I almost said something softer. Old habits die hard. Instead, I said, "Then the truth shouldn't be a problem." She didn't answer. The night before the trip, I slipped a small flash drive into my coat pocket. Black case. Unlabeled. I slept better than I had in years. Because for once, I wasn't hoping to be chosen. I was choosing myself. The lodge was exactly what I expected, expensive in a way that tried too hard. Wood-beamed ceilings, curated rustic decor, fireplaces, staged for photographs rather than warmth. Everything smelled faintly of pine and money. When I arrived just late enough to miss the group photo, but early enough to be noticed, conversations dipped for half a second before snapping back into place. There it was, that familiar pause, that recalculation. My aunt recovered first, of course. "Amy," she said, pulling me into a stiff hug that never reached her eyes. "Well, look who finally made time for her family." I smiled. Wouldn't miss it. Ryan offered a lazy half-wave. Jared looked me up and down. "New coat," he muttered. "Business must be good." "Busy enough," I replied pleasantly. They didn't know what I knew. Jim was already inside, standing near the hired videographer, adjusting cables and nodding along like an obedient assistant. When our eyes met, he gave me the smallest nod. Cameras were rolling. I moved through the weekend like a ghost who had learned how to be solid. I didn't hover near the center of attention. I didn't try to insert myself into conversations that had always closed ranks around me. I sat with the quieter relatives, helped clear dishes, played cards with the kids. And I listened. Denise complained under her breath about low-energy people bringing down the mood. Ryan joked about how some people just don't fit the brand. Jared rolled his eyes whenever I spoke like my existence was a personal inconvenience. Every word was captured. By the time my interview slot arrived, I was calm. The chair was positioned under bright lights. A young videographer named Scott clipped the microphone to my collar and asked if I was nervous. "No," I said honestly. "Just ready." He counted down. 3, 2, 1. I looked straight into the lens. "My name is Amy Castaneda," I said evenly, and for most of my life I thought I was the problem. Later, when I handed Scott the flash drive, I didn't make a speech. I didn't dramatize it. "This is my segment," I said. "For the time capsule. Please play it in full. No edits." Scott hesitated, then nodded. "Got it." The rest of the day unfolded with forced cheer. Smiles sharpened at the edges. My mother avoided my eyes. Nathan stayed near the back, watching quietly like a lighthouse no one noticed until it mattered. That night I slept without dreams, because the next morning there would be no hiding. Legacy hour was scheduled for 10 in the morning. By 9:30, the lodge's main den was already filling up. Folding chairs scraped softly across the wooden floor as people arranged themselves in a loose semicircle facing the massive flat-screen TV. Fresh coffee steamed on a side table. Someone had set out pastries no one seemed hungry for. The air felt tight. Not tense in an obvious way, more like everyone had dressed their nerves up in politeness and hoped no one would notice. My aunt stood near the screen with the remote in her hand, glowing with the kind of pride that only comes from believing you're in control of the story. Ryan and Jared sat to her left phones, out laughing quietly at something no one else could see. My parents were a few rows back. My mother's hands were clasped together so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Nathan leaned against the stone fireplace at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching everything. Jim stood near the AV setup beside Scott, blending in perfectly. I took a seat near the vial, not hiding, not center stage either, exactly where I wanted to be. "All right, everyone," my aunt announced brightly. "This is going to be something really special, a gift to ourselves and to future generations. Our family, in our own words." She pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. The first few segments were harmless, sweet even. Haley talked about baking cookies with our grandmother. Jared told a story about a camping trip where he exaggerated his heroics until a few people laughed. Ryan spoke confidently about ambition's success carrying the family name forward. My aunt dabbed at her eyes during her segment, voice trembling as she spoke about unity tradition and how no matter what family always shows up. I sat very still. Then the screen went black for a brief second. A new title card appeared. Untitled, dots move. The room shifted. My voice filled the space, steady, unhurried. "My name is Amy Castaneda, and for most of my life, I believed that silence was the price of belonging. The first image appeared a photo of me at 6 years old, seated alone at a kid's table while the rest of the family posed behind me for a group picture. A few murmurs rippled through the room. I thought if I stayed quiet, helpful, small enough one day, I'd be invited in. The screen cut to short clips me shoveling snow while laughter echoed inside the house, me fixing a generator in the dark during a holiday blackout, me clearing plates while my cousins lounged on the couch. My aunt shifted in her chair. Then the audio clips began. Ryan's voice laughing when your cousin's too boring for the real party. A sharp inhale somewhere behind me. Denise's voice unmistakable. She just brings the energy down. Some people don't know when they don't belong at the table. Turn that off, my aunt snapped, half rising from her chair. Jim didn't move. Scott hesitated, then looked at the schedule at the file name at my aunt and pressed play again. The footage continued. A still image appeared on screen me, sitting alone in the garage plate on my lap, space heater glowing beside me. This was last Christmas, my narration said calmly, when I was told the main table was for real family. The room went silent, not a polite silence, a stunned one. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Jared stood up abruptly. What the hell is this? This, my voice continued over the footage, is what family looks like when they think no one is watching. Screenshots followed text messages dismissing my feelings, jokes framed as harmless. The $10 gas card rotating slowly on the screen like evidence. My aunt was fully standing now, face flushed. You ambushed us. No, I said aloud, rising from my chair at last. My voice didn't shake. I showed up, just like everyone else. Ryan turned toward me, anger and panic colliding in his expression. You're sick. You've been collecting this stuff. I didn't collect anything, I replied. You gave it to me. The screen faded to black. White text appeared. Legacy isn't what you preserve, it's what you refuse to pass down. The video ended. No music, no applause, just truth hanging in the air, heavy and unavoidable. I took a breath, then walked toward the exit. Behind me, chaos erupted, voices, overlapping accusations, flying denial, scrambling to survive exposure. But none of it followed me out the door. Nathan did. As we stepped into the cold morning air, he placed a hand on my shoulder. That, he said quietly, wasn't revenge. I nodded, feeling lighter with every step away from the lodge. It was closure. The cold hit my face like a baptism. Sharp, clean, unforgiving in the best way. I drew in a breath that burned my lungs and felt more alive than I had in years. Behind us, through the lodge's tall windows, shadows moved frantically. Arms gestured, mouths opened wide in arguments I no longer needed to hear. Nathan walked beside me in silence until we reached the car. That was something he said finally. I nodded. I didn't want to hurt anyone. You didn't, he replied. You let the truth speak for itself. We drove away without rushing. No dramatic music, no speeding tires, just distance growing steadily between me and a place that had never known what to do with me. My phone buzzed halfway down the mountain road. Mom. I let it ring. It buzzed again. I answered this time, putting it on speaker. Amy, she said, her voice breaking. Please come back. We need to talk. I know, I said gently, but not today. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. You didn't have to embarrass everyone. I didn't embarrass anyone, I replied. I just stopped protecting lies. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing. I'm sorry, she said finally, soft, small. I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to rewind everything and sit in the garage again if it meant she'd choose me. But that part was tired and done negotiating. I hope you mean that, I said. For the next person who gets treated like I did. She didn't answer. I ended the call. That week, I uploaded my segment to a private link and sent it to a handful of people. The quiet cousins, the ones who'd always looked uncomfortable but never spoke up. Some responded, some didn't. One message stood out, from Haley. I watched everything. I didn't know how bad it was. I'm sorry, and thank you. That was enough. Back home, Circuit and Soul felt different. Customers lingered longer. Conversations went deeper. Someone must have shared the video because business picked up noticeably, but more than repairs came through the door, stories did. People sat across from me and talked about being ignored, minimized, erased. I listened because I understood. Thanksgiving passed quietly. No invitation came. I didn't expect one. Instead, I hosted dinner at the shop, brought in folding tables, set up space heaters, strung lights across the workbench. A few regulars showed up, people with nowhere else to go, people who wanted to be somewhere they were seen. I sat at the head of that table, not in exile, not in silence, just present. Christmas arrived without drama. No tense phone calls, no forced smiles, no last-minute invitations wrapped in guilt. The absence was clean this time, not a wound, but a boundary. I spent the morning at Circuit and Soul adjusting a few loose lights, brewing too much coffee, listening to the quiet hum of a place that finally felt like mine. Snow started falling around noon, soft, unhurried, the kind that makes the world feel smaller and safer. By evening, the shop filled slowly. A retired teacher I'd helped months earlier brought homemade soup. A college student showed up with a loaf of bread still warm from the oven. One of the Little League parents dropped off cookies shaped like circuit boards, badly iced but earnest. No one asked why I wasn't with my family. No one needed to. We ate, laughed, shared stories that didn't compete for attention. No hierarchy, no inner circle, just people choosing to be there. At one point, I caught my reflection in the shop window. I looked different. Not louder, not harder, just grounded, like someone who knew where she stood. Later that night, after everyone left, Nathan stayed behind to help clean up. We worked side by side in comfortable silence until the floors were swept and the lights dimmed. "You did good," he said finally. "So did you," I replied. He smiled. "You know, letting go doesn't mean you lose everything." I nodded. Sometimes it's how you finally keep yourself. That night, as I locked up the shop and stepped into the cold, I realized something that would have terrified me a year ago. I hadn't lost a family. I'd let go of an illusion. And in its place, I'd built something honest, something warm, something chosen. I didn't need to be cropped out of anyone's picture anymore. I was finally standing in my own frame,